Hello, welcome to Lackluster Reactions. I'm your Lackluster Reactor, here today for my final view on another show. This time, The Owl House. Specifically, Season 3, but I plan on dividing today's video into two parts. Well, I'm going to want to have it as 3 parts. But first, I'll do general views on Season 3, now that we have it all as a whole. Second, I would talk on the characters, mostly the main characters, through the season, but with needed explanation of earlier seasons. Third, I'll go through my general impressions of the show, specifically why the show is so great. Which, spoilers, the show is great, but there's much I need to say about what might be the best Western animated show we have had in a while. I love the show. I watch the show. Name one person who has done that and does not have at least mildly positive opinions of it, much less singing its praises. Regardless, it is time, my bats and my cats, to start the show. First, our first episode, thanks to them. Overall, an excellent episode despite we will call them production issues, which the team was forced to work through. Well, we will forever be sad we never got a true Season 3, and I never got to spend more time with the lovely child known as V. The montage we got at the beginning gave an excellent taste of everything we will never given a full episode on. Which, first real place to start. Congratulations again, and for all eternity, to the coming out of Luz to Camilla. I know all my non-asexual peers loved it, but two personal highlights for me were, first off, the clothing store scene because V is a cutie pie and I want to adopt her as well. Camilla is lucky. And second, Hunter having his breakdown only to be comforted by Willow. Especially with what we get in part 2, I would have loved this scene with more dialogue. But more than anything, here's where we really see Luz starting to fall apart. Where we do not get as much growth as of the other characters outside of their fun times in the human world, we definitely got a healthy dose of Luz and Camilla, with Luz finally having given up her hope and ready to give up her dreams, all because she blames herself for everything that has happened to this point. Unfairly, but we will get to that when we talk about Luz herself. But, well, some will argue it is the later fight in the episode that is the greatest scene of the episode. For me, I would argue it was Camilla watching Luz's video diaries, because it put so much into context about everything Luz is. I think it was officially confirmed that Luz has ADHD, but it's not the curiosity and the boundless energy that has made Luz the girl we start the show with. It is this world. Everyone has that one series or book or whatever that shaped their lives. For me, it was Ominiko. Luz, at the darkest moment when her father died, she found a story which touched her heart and tried to channel her already chaotic energy into the realm of witches and fantasy. But that was not a world her peers or teachers were willing to accept. A large part of who Luz is, unfortunately, she's used to being the outcast, the screw-up, the weirdo. She wants to be better, just like the heroes in the stories she has always read. But that has never been something the people around her could accept. Then, she found the Boiling Isles, magical lands of demons and witches, and thought, this is it. This is her chance. Only to find reality is still reality. And even when it's not her fault, she still made mistakes which helped the enemy, or was unable to save those she wanted to save. And seeing the video of her one last shot and making her mother proud, right next to her vow to throw away everything she has always dreamed of, definitely the best scene of the episode. It is also here we have the only mention of the brothers' backstories, outside of playing I Spy in the backgrounds. We learn all we can about how Philip and Caleb grew up, how they arrived at the Boiling Isles, in general. There were still a few pieces missing, and there was kind of a cop-out of Lou's living here and apparently never hearing the story. Though that can be explained by our new head of the city's historical society seeming more interested in putting together exhibits which do not involve aliens or themselves as a white knight. And, as we will get to later, we were given just as much of the backstory as we truly needed. Maybe even more than that. It does, in a way, help to have some history to fill in the dots. And then we have the door back, which, despite pieces of the episode feeling abridged because, unfortunately it was, is an actual solution which would have fitted equally with the falling story. We know witches, somehow, have been able to go from one side to the other, even before Belos made his door. And we know that the power of glyphs comes from the Titan. We saw in Season 1 that the glyphs normally do not walk on Earth. So logically, if Titan's blood is needed to go from one side to the other, there must be a way on this side and some Titan's blood to go with it. Titan's blood, which is just enough to activate the power of the glyphs. Even without the Rebus, the Titan was still calling Luz back home. The battle is also great, not without complaints though. I believe I already said my piece on preferring animation quality spread out instead of spikes just for certain moments. But we got to see everyone, including V, in the swing-in during the battle. Though most notably Hunter, who, in another highlight of the episode, fought back against Belos, managed to tell a person who has always controlled him, tormented him his entire life, that he is going his own path, and he's not just going to be a clone of someone to him, and, as the Golden Old God has always seemed to do, chose the witches over Belos' mad plans. While he is not able to stop Belos from going back, he is able to let him know that in his madness, he is as alone as he always was. And how can I end overall highlights of the first episode without a mention of Flapjack? It's not like everyone was not worried about it since the moment Hunter inherited the talisman, but in the last sacrifice, he saved Hunter and more. For so long, we have seen Belos talismans taking their powers and extending his life, until the false face of a human gave way to the true monster he has always been. But Flapjack, he was not forced to give his powers, but willingly did so to save Hunter, not only saving the boy's life, but enhancing him with his own magic, so that he would always know that he was always there beside him. While I probably will not mention it when talking on Episode 3, it is great seeing the squad all have tattoos of Flapjack, showing even with him gone, they all stand together. So, final thoughts on Episode 1? It was great. Not perfect, we needed more time for that, but it was a nice bridge, a nice cool down after the last finale, a nice build up to the new conflicts of this season, both external and internal. And overall, the only real complaint I have is that we'll never see more of the gang in the human world outside of fanfics. Disney has a lot to answer for. Starting with Part 2, all things considered, the best way to look at it is examination of the Boiling Isles, as it is under the Collector. First, of course, the world as it is, torn apart. It is kind of cliche that the breakdown of society is accompanied by graffiti. I mean, if everyone is leaving civilization behind, why would they take the time to sign their names on walls? Either way, It did create a decent juxtaposition with the cotton candy and starshine world the collector played his games in. It is a decent early examination of how the collector is not all evil, but instead is living in an illusion, which can only stand up for so long. And to match this is how the people of the world have been reduced to dolls. Let's examine this for a little bit. First, dolls are built to last, made to be unchanging no matter how much time passes, even if they are just left to gather dust. Which, considering the collector's goal of collecting, it is of course the perfect form of preservation. It also brings to mind the collectors of action figures, though the collector of course wants his toys outside of the box where he can have fun with them. And then there is the creepy factor. Fun fact, us Americans have a higher than average fear of dolls. In fact, in other countries, being scared of dolls is considered unusual. Same with clowns, but we are talking about dolls. But either way, it fits. For one reason or another, this topic or concept is one which has fear bloom in certain people's hearts, while for others, they're just fun toys. I think there's a nice unintended way to show just how different the collector's perspective is compared to everyone else's. And then we have a look at the school and our rebels, which involves everything being held together by just a thread. On the one hand, this looks like the typical depiction of children left to maintain the world by themselves without parental supervision. However, we later find that some of the children do have actual plans which would improve their life to be equal or maybe even surpass that of the former civilization. However, it was purposely being mismanaged by Basha and Kikimor in glasses in order to reign tyrannically. It was a betrayal which we all saw coming, but seeing how good things can be with the right people in charge, even during an apocalypse, does show how efficient management or widespread mismanagement can affect a civilization's growth. Hence, we will not have much to say about them later, let's briefly talk about our two villains of this episode, Basha and Kikimor. Two of the main villains we have had to deal with throughout the season, overshadowed by Belos and the Collector. The same can be said for Terra and Odelia, but they have been completely defanged by this point. As for these two, one has been the biggest adversary during the school episodes, now alone and seeking simply to have someone by her side, even if begging Amity to come back. The other is the quirky henchman whose level of threat has fluctuated from episode to episode, still trying to maintain power in the post-Belos world. Neither of them are a major threat compared to the Genocider and the Kid God, but in terms of a threat, they are little more than filler villains at this point. Not the greatest of additions, but at least we were given a chance to close the door on these two. But most of the things I liked about episode 2 was character development, which we'll reach in time. Our next step instead would be my favorite part of the episode, which was just Belos, haunted by the ghosts of his past. And nothing was really said. Caleb and the guards just was staring at him, disapprovingly. Like so much of the relationship between Belos and his brother, and his brother's artificial lineage. It's not the part which is said, but the things which were never talked about. Again, full thoughts on that later, but seeing Belos haunted by his actions and just continuing to march on without any thoughts that he might be wrong says a lot about him as a villain. Yet, they still haunt him, literally or metaphorically, which speaks volumes as well. I'm going to need water if I'm going to survive all this video. And the final part which needs to be spoken on this episode is, of course, our little string bean. Luce's talismans. Some may feel shapeshifters to be a cop-out, just a way to make all guesses true. But if you stop and think, it makes a whole lot of sense. What track of magic did Luce wish to learn in a world which tried to push her to learn only one? All of them. What majors is Luce taking now that she's in magical college? All of them. A shapeshifter is not a choice of indecision, but a reflection of Luce's decision to be everything, do everything, enjoy the world to its limits. So a shapeshifter was a perfect reflection of what is in Luce's heart, and therefore the perfect choice for her companion. So, overall assessment for episode 2. It is what I call a bridge chapter. It, in and of itself, may not be as great as something on either side of it, but its purpose is not to stand alone, but to get from point A to point B. We took the time to deal with the emotional trauma of many of our main and side characters to get it clear out of the way before the final battle. We saw where minor villains were and either had them defeated, turned, or brushed aside as useless pieces, and saw where all the minor characters we may care about stand right before they have little to do for the rest of the season. It accomplishes what it wanted, but as always, the bridge chapter ends up the weakest episode of the 3. Still good, but just on the edge of average. And now, the final episode. What can I say about this that does not have my individual thoughts on the character? Well, first, I will be talking about the individual structures our main 3 go through. One thing I can say is that I like how it ended, and really the use of the light glyphs through the entire episode. When we look through everything related to it, about how the glyphs are the language of Titans, and about how the new glyph of light resembles Luce, it is clear that it to be directly connected to Luce. First and most obviously, her name translates to light. It is also the first glyph she learned, and it was the one Belos was unable to find until Luce showed it to him. It was the one she used to find her way back home from the demon realm to the demon realm. And this episode is not only used to dispel the illusions the 3 are trapped under, but when Luce goes full Titan mode, it is not only featured prominently in her design, but the attacks she uses. Luce has been the light for so many on the Burning Isles. It's good to see that her greatest connection to magic doubles as her signature. I will talk about the Collector specifically later, but I enjoy how we work to get the Collector on our side by having him, if minorly, experience what brought them all together, and brought Luce into the person she is today. First, the Owl House itself, where Luce not only had many interactions with her friends and family, but also where she learned the light glyph, the plant glyph, and where she made the glyph combinations. We have the Grudgeby Court, where she learned the fire glyph, but also the place where she did gain a deeper connection with Amity. One of many places, we couldn't visit them all in one episode. Finally, the knee, where she first connected with the Titan itself and learned the ice glyph. I'm not sure if it was intentional, but it ended up being the perfect 3 places to visit for the girl who was about to gain mastery of the glyphs like never before, and you lose the ability to use them. Speaking on that, first, small shout out to the funniest moment before the saddest moment. The Collector forgiving Belos. Just top notch. Showing that the usual rose-colored glasses approach they try to stick into cartoons is overly simplistic. And there are some people who kindness is, unfortunately, not the answer. That is a lesson to make sure children learn. Of course, we have to mention the one scene, the part where Luce dies. The beautiful thing about it is how everyone seems to feel the loss of Luz the moment it happens. Her leaving behind lights floating across the entire island, with some like Camilla knowing deep in their hearts what it meant. And pair that with the Collector knowing the limits of mortality, his childishness being tempered by feelings of actual loss. And of course, shout out to King and Ida in their blind rage. Beautiful forms. But most of all, we finally complete the pattern set up for us in past seasons. Season 1, Ida at her worst, thank Luz. Season 2, King with his back against the wall, thank Luz. And now, we have the moment where Luz realizes that when she was leaving herself, she should have thanked them back as she slowly sank into the abyss. Powerful. And when I'm saying discussions of the Titan for the characters section, this is the perfect time to examine the consequences. That being Luz going full beast mode. Or Titan mode to be more accurate. But yes, Luz pulling out the super mode combined with the powers of all three forms of magic and, let's be honest, looking gorgeous all the while doing it. Yes, with our Harpy sisters, it has now been established that everyone needs a super mode. Thank you very much for that, Dana. Also, side note that I finally hit on when I actually sat down to research. While watching the episode, I was questioning why the grass was red. I, not having watched the episode since the second episode came out, had forgotten red is the normal color for the Boiling Isles grass. Which I believe is an important thing to examine further because Belos, in his transformation, takes the color green, the color of Earth's grass, but the plants he forces to grow upon the isle are not grass, but taking the forms of fungus and slightly ocean life-esque growths. The reality is, Belos is trying to paint the world through his ideal image, but it is as foreign to the Boiling Isles as trying to place the grass of our world with raw meat would be. Which, considering everything is built on a corpse, that actually fits pretty well as a comparison. And the red grass blooming under light cliffs is Luz setting everything right. And since the best part of the episode is one I'll mention in the character sections, one final shout out to the end credit / time skip. While all the questions are not answered, we see all our kids grown and happy. We see the town rebuilt, we see the last traces of Belos finally being erased from the world. We see Luz, whether she ever fit in this world or not, make her way through high school, win scholarships, and in general just have a fun time with her friends and adopted family. And it sounds like she spent a good 3 to 4 years of her life helping to rebuild the island, likely still due to her blaming herself for it happening instead of acknowledging it was never her fault. But that did not stop her from giving up her birthdays to help. And in the last scene, we are given a goodbye from the cast, weirdos and all. As a final chapter, this episode was all needed to be to wrap up the story. Confrontations with our villains, redemption for one, dashing the dreams of the other. Was it the more we wanted? Yes. Could they have given Hootie a single line? Yes. But as for wrapping up the story in the small amount of time that Disney had given them, the cast did phenomenally. 10/10, chef's kiss all around. Now that we have finished with the episodes, let's go with the real analysis. The characters. Our group of misfits have grown a lot since the beginning of the series, and while I am focusing on the moments of Season 3, we need to look at where the characters came from. Starting with the main three, though some of them we got less of than others, and them having reached the apex of the growth from previous seasons, though the results can still be seen. First off is King. In the beginning, we find King is little more than the team pet. The weird creature with an overblown ego. Yeah, I'm going to continue saying eagle instead of ego this time on time. With an overblown ego, who spends his time making selfish decisions and acting like a little kid. He was more on the sidelines, his adventures mattering about as much as Hootie's, and his effects on the plot mattering less than that of the Hex Squad. Then we reach Season 2, and we begin to find out what King is. We found out about his mysterious backstory, found his powers, and found the mysterious person who may or may not have been his long-lost father. While it was not something which no one guessed, we would eventually find that King, the self-proclaimed king of demons, was actually a titan, a creature that people around him treated as a god. Everything he ever wanted. But it wasn't. As time went on, and he has spent more and more time with Ida and Luz, he grew closer and closer to them. Sure, the ego was still there, but he slowly walked away from the illusions of a king and the role of a pet, and slowly became part of the family. Ida was not just a friend/pet owner, she slowly became his mother, eventually even legally. And throughout both seasons, the more he interacted with Luz, and the more they became siblings. He had a family. And suddenly the little monarch, who only wanted power, who only wanted respect, who always saw himself as a king, he just wanted to be himself. When all of it was torn away, he did not want to be the all-powerful god with legions marching to his every whim. He just wanted to play catch like any other boy his age. And so he chose the path of not a king, not a god, a man. Well, demon. You know what I meant. Which in the end, and actually getting into Season 3, was why he became the one who was able to talk to the Collector about as he was able to. Because he is the one who most understood the position of the Collector. He was the child who spent all his time playing with stuffed animals because they were the ones he could command and would allow him to feel like he was in charge. He was the one who had always dreamt of being all-powerful, being able to rain destruction on his enemies and be feared by all. He had lived his life playing the Collector's game, so he was the one who actually realized the consequences of what it meant when it was real, while still recognizing that it was a child playing it, and the way to beat him was not to trap him or to destroy him, but to teach him the lessons he was taught by his family. Of the three, I believe King was the one who was given the least screen time, and the least serious moments. However, that does not mean his growth and the lessons he learned were any less important. He was someone who desired respect and power more than anything, desired to be a king, a god, but was taught that none of that mattered as much as his mother and sister. King Clotharn was the god who chose the life of a mortal, and I am glad to see he did his parents proud. Then we had Ida. Ida has lived a hard life. She was one of the strongest witches, at the top of her game as a child, only to one day be inflicted by a curse. And slowly as the curse grows, the transformation to the owl beast and the slow loss of magic slowly becomes secondary problems, as the main consequence of the curse raises its head. The isolation, the loneliness, the fear of hurting the people she cares about around her. Her family, her school life, her romantic partner, all pushed away as the fear consumed her. Then she found King. At first the little guy was little more than a pet. But as soon as Ida realized he was intelligent, he became her confidant, another outcast who was the only person Ida could count on, because both had no one. And then another outcast came to her, a human, who wanted to learn magic, something Ida knew was impossible. But the girl was willing to help the person she cared about try to get back something he cared about. And it was, hey, free labor where she did not really have to do anything because it was impossible. And so she invited another person into her life. And as time went on, she became closer to Luz. Luz, who saw her cursed vermin, did not run away, but helped her when she was in trouble. Luz, who tried to enjoy her everyday life. Luz, who helped her talk to her sister again, and who stood up to help her when Belos took her to be executed through petrification. And as time went on, she became closer and closer to not just her sister, but she rekindled her relationship with her mother and began speaking with her father again. She reunited with Rain again, and while nothing was officially confirmed, we all saw some old sparks rise between them. And let's not forget, the little child she cared for all these years, turned to her and asked her to officially become her mother, his mother. It was everything she could have ever wanted. First, we see how important all of this is for her, how far she has come. First, she does everything she can to try to get Luz and King away from the front lines, away from the Day of Unity, away from the battle Ida does not think they need to be part of. All she wants is her family to be safe. And in the finale, when the Collector showed Ida her worst fear, it was captured again, treated like a monster again, all at odds with her family again. All reminders of how she has lived her life all these years under the curse. All these years until someone came to free her from the prison she had put herself into. Well, the final fight was Luz's. It was great seeing Ida beside her, helping her fight by being the same kind mentor even in the middle of the battle. Teaching Luz, who was now able to use the full power of the Titans and had the ability to cast magic naturally. Teach her how to use magic circles. Up in the sky, dancing with Luz as they drew the large light glyph, holding her two children close as they charged headlong into danger, knowing that her greatest student could more than handle herself. And in the end, where did she end up? No, not mentor for one child, but a headmaster of wild magic, where she, though still without magic, can pass her knowledge on to the next generation. And, in a direct spit to Belos' face, now she is in the position to help all those on the island learn how they want to, experience the magic they want to. Which, especially beautifully when you remember that it was Principal Bump who was the one who stood up and took a chance on her when she was one boring class away from lighting Hexside on fire. And now she'll be the bump to the next generation of witches. The final shot, I think, exemplifies Ida's change from where she is now as opposed to where she was at the beginning of the series. Sure, all the people who were there for Luz, but just as much, many, if not most of them, are part of Ida's life now, in part to a connection to Luz and King for some, and by her own merits for people like Rain and Lilith for others. The greatest consequence of the curse was that it made her lose everyone. And now, she'll never be alone again. Luz and King would not allow that, and Rain certainly would not. Now, the last of the main three, we have Luz, one of the three who actually grew these last 3 episodes. We have known Luz for a while. Yeah, someone who stood out a bit, was weird, had trouble dealing with people, but she always had a good heart, was always there for looking out to do the right thing, and loved the Boiling Isles more than anyone. We saw her through good, we saw her through bad, we saw her make friends, we saw her break down. We have been with her through her best and her worst this entire time. But then, Season 2 rolls around, and we start to see that break down. She pushes herself to not only not be a burden on her found family, even though they would never want to see her put herself in needless danger. She pushes herself to make the portal, and then puts another burden on her back by promising her mother she will stay when she makes it back to the human world. She learns about Belos, who he is, and what role she played in giving him power, and spends the rest of the season beating herself up about it, all finally accumulating in she and her friends trapped on the human side of the door, with no way to get back. By the end of the opening for the first episode, we see the results of everything she has went through to this point. Direct criticism of the hero's journey, despondence from being unable to solve everything, and most notably of all, disconnect with her friend group. The only person of it she really interacts with this episode being Hunter. We went from the girl who was releasing snakes and spiders in school to someone who barely responds to emotion to most situations in the episode. Heck, if it was not for her mother, she would have tried throwing her dreams away as a way to punish herself for what she felt responsible for. All well-written characters have strengths and flaws. Luz has many strengths. She is friendly enough to bring light to the life of many people around her. She is studious when it is something she finds interest in. She will always work to help others, even when she puts herself in harm's way to do so. And let's not forget the wide-eyed optimism that led to her falling in love with the Boiling Isles to begin with. But one of her greatest flaws is she takes everything upon herself. And when things go bad, even if they are nothing anyone could have done to change the outcome, she will always blame herself. Sure, another flaw is her habit of jumping in without thinking and then needing to fix the issues she caused. But she is not responsible for many of the major things that went wrong. She is not responsible for Belos, or the Collector, or the collapse of the door, or everyone being separated in two different worlds. And yet, it does not feel that way to her. She has always dreamed of heroes since the earliest moments we saw her. Yet in episode 1, time skip, it takes us to a jaded Luz, deriding hero's journey, because she sees herself in it. Which, yes, she is the hero, but she is fixated on the points of the person people being hurt and the mistakes being made, because that is the point of the journey she is at. And because of everything, she cannot take the next step forward until the pearl is right there in front of her. And even then, it is still with the intention of throwing away her happiness as some sort of punishment she thinks she deserves. But then, it happens. We are given again the requirement to unlock a talisman. Simply tell them what it is you want. What does the future you want to move towards look like? And the girl who never fit in with anyone, who felt she lost the respect of her mother, one of all weirdos, found someone who told her she was not broken, that she had a beautiful heart and no one should ever try to change that. She had found friends in a second family, but even to them she had her quirks that they loved but never understood. That was what she needed, more than anything, was someone who could understand what it was like to be her. And when that happened, well, I believe the best way to examine it is through the fights. Look at the battles at the latter half of Season 2 and beginnings of Season 3. All of them tense, all of them taken fully seriously, with the cast, including Luz, looking concerned or scared or tearful, which, considering the stakes, fits. But take that to the final battle, where the stakes are at their highest. We have Luz, full Titan power, fighting alongside King and Ida. What does she do? How does she look? Or better yet, all three of them. They are calm. They are smiling. They are nuzzling each other and dancing. Luz, the girl who stayed in the boiling isles to become a witch, to have an adventure, for the first time in so long, there she is, with her and her friends' lives on the line, and her having fun in the face of a second death. Some might call it crazy. Us fans call it being glad to see our Willow come back to us. And in the end, where does Luz end her hero's journey? She who struggled to fit in managed to finish high school, with both excellent grades, at least in one subject, and a scholarship. She who was alone is surrounded by friends and family, all there to celebrate her, because, even if there was a time she thought she would be better off never born, everyone around her disagrees. And she has her dream still, after all this time, coming true right before her eyes. And how does she plan to tackle that bright future? In the most loose way possible, doing everything she has the option of doing. Not really the smallest idea going to college, but if anyone can do it, it's Luz. In the end, I and many of us like seeing Luz grow up. An idealistic child who went face to face with the world, even if it was not all world, and found it was not all sunshines and rainbows, but then faced the worst parts of it and became jaded. However, in the end, with the right people beside her, she stood back up on her feet and regained the spark she had at the beginning. She, who made mistakes and learned from them, and, at the end of the day, who is a little wiser but still a little weird. Not a naive child, but as an adult who realizes that they do not have to abandon the things they love to be an adult. At the end of the day, Luz became a more complete person than, unfortunately, some people in real life. And it was great having the chance to watch her achieve her dreams. Now, with the big three out of the way, let's look at some of our other favorite characters. Unfortunately, as another consequence of everything being cut short, I do not really have much to say in terms of Gus, or Amity, or V, or Hootie. Not even Hootie. The boy had no lines in the last episode, and it hurts me so much. Especially with the Titan and the Eye. But shoving that aside, we have time, mostly in episode 2, to develop our characters. So let's look at how far they have come. First, Hunter. Hunter came into Season 2 as the loyal stooge of the Emperor, better than Luz and the powerless Ida, a real threat. Until Luz actually got a chance to talk to him, to team up with him for just a few moments. But it was not Luz who changed Hunter, it was Flapjack. For once in the poor boy's life, he had someone beside Belos and the Coven Heads and Kikimora whispering in his ear. He actually had someone pulling him, leading him to do the right thing and not just follow orders blindly. Flapjack pulled him to Willow, and from there he was an emerald entrail, actually had friends, actually had something besides just missions. From there he quickly gained Darius' respect and actually had a father figure on his side. He then found himself at Hexside, where his prior goodwill had others rallying around him. By the end of the season, the abused child was no longer alone. And that was what he needed, especially when he faced the darkest moment in his life, the realization everything Belos had told him, even about himself, was a lie. Under any other circumstances, Hunter would have just broken down. Had no reason to trust others, no reason to continue living. But his friends were there. Even when he did not believe in himself, Gus found out and treated him normally. And while they did not know what to say at first, no one was angry about him being a Grimwalker. I mean, why would they? He had no say on how he was born. He was their friend. End of story. And when he lost Flapjack, his friends were there to comfort him, to be there to help him through what was lost. Unfortunately, it was cut short, but we see the results in the end just like we do with the others. He is now carving talisman, bringing back from the edge of extinction the same kind of creatures who saved him when he needed it the most. And the story is so beautiful because we see him transform from a villain to a kid. Amity was a little mean, and the Collector caused mass destruction, but it was Hunter who was the Emperor's second in command, the one who had followed Belos his entire life, and had the least reason to join on to Luce's side at the start. But just because one starts on the wrong side does not mean they have to stay on the wrong side, does not mean they cannot grow, and does not mean that they will not have people waiting for them on the other side, arms wide open. Plus, the boy likes wolves, so he's alright in my book. And matching Hunter, we have Willow. Willow was the first friend Luce made on the Boiling Isles, and therefore we see her struggles from the beginning. Her never being good enough, pushed down and bullied, always half a witch Willow. But through meeting Luce, she was able to change her path in life, walked away from abominations where she was suffocating, and into plants where she blossomed. She was able to stand up to her bullies, reconcile with Amity after the messy resolution of their friendship, and all around change her life from one of suffering to one of growth. Yes, I will likely continue to make plant puns. Shut up. Then, during Season 2, she took a back seat, but her growth did not slow down. In the time we were not looking at her, our girl started getting buff and going from a general school outcast to an athlete, which interestingly brings her in direct parallel with Basha, but they do not have much to say about her directly. What I'm saying is that Willow became strong, both physically and emotionally, both becoming one of the most powerful witches we have seen, but also becoming someone others can rely on. While Luce started the process, it was Willow who gave fellow half-a-witch Hunter a place to belong, and who finished her reconciliation with Amity by showing she is no longer that weak girl who needed protecting. By the end of the season, Willow has found herself in a position of trust among her friend group, to her detriment. With Luce falling apart, Willow found herself in the position of being the responsible one, the team mom, the one who Gus and Hunter and Amity could count on to lean on when they were in need. However, it's not like she had any more idea than anyone else what they were going to do, or how they were going to accomplish what they set out to do. And she spent her whole life being bullied. She may have gotten stronger to the point of being able to help others, but that was still something new to her, and it is not like her self-doubt would instantly be cured, especially when things start going wrong and start going wrong and start going wrong. She is a 14-year-old kid like the rest of them, being there emotionally for everyone who fell into one of the traps that the solid rock always falls into. That if they show emotion, if they break down, how can they support others? Though, does that not just prove that they are weak? That they are failures? I feel I need to make a reference here. Should it be Frozen or Encanto? Both are Disney, so I guess it comes down to a horse apiece. I guess, either way, as one internalizes the problems, they just kept growing that much larger. And when you have magic, and powerful magic at that, breakdowns can be devastating things. Sure, it might start out with letting the grass grow from under your feet, but once you begin to let emotions out, they tend to not stop. They come out rushing all at once, consuming everything. I bet Willow is glad her powers are not water, but what she had to deal with is just as bad, wasn't it? The funny thing about being the person people can rely on, if they are decent people themselves, if they are decent people, someone who is willing to care about you in turn, they tend to be there for you, not willing to pay you. It's not a scale, a ledger. Friends are there for each other. I guess it's friends in the case of Hunter, but also friends. If there is anyone who understands Willow, it is someone else who has spent his entire life feeling like half a witch, spent his life feeling unbelievably weak compared to those around him. And Hunter was there for Willow like she had been there for him. And that is the crux of Willow's story. She started out weak, and we have seen her grow from the bully girl to one of the strongest witches we know. But it was the moment she finally allowed herself to cry, to admit she was not okay. That was the moment where Willow's character development reached its conclusion, because she was finally strong enough to be weak. And then we have one last main character to talk about. One whose story I would be remiss doing this review and skipping. Camilla. That's right, last minute addition to the team, but one of the important linchpins to the narrative. Better yet, one character who has most of the focus done in Season 3. So, what kind of growth do we have for Camilla? First, where did she start? Specifically for us as the audience. She was Luce's parent, a normal person who was just one of the many people in Luce's life who did not get her. She was the one who started the plot, ready to send her daughter away to summer camp, to help her think inside the box. A sentiment many of my LGBT plus brethren watching the show likely first saw flashes of conversion therapy, which glad V did not actually have to go to that kind of camp. Either way, here's the person Luce loves the most, and the one she fears the most, which leaves us outsiders an impression not exactly flattering. Then we actually were able to see more of her. At the moment she was forced to confront the fact magic was real, and her daughter was off somewhere in another world. And when faced with a monster, one many people in our world would likely abandon without a second thought, she showed V kindness. She protected her, and brings her on as one of her own daughters. But at the same time, she, in grief of being separated from her daughter, makes the promise to come home and not leave. A sentiment which makes sense for a parent to want, but I recall how many people rush to frame Camilla as a bad mother. Come Season 3, and we learn that is her biggest fear, being a bad mother. In one scene, we see everything Camilla has done, and everything Camilla has failed to do. We see a mother, one who herself spent her childhood judged, raising her weird child to try to be herself in a judgmental world. She tries for so long to do the right thing for her daughter. But when everyone in the world is telling you, you are wrong, sometimes despite your best intentions, you start to believe them. And in a moment of weakness, she made a decision which made her daughter think she was just another person who wanted her to be normal, at a time when she needed someone to tell her it was all right to be herself. And so Luce ran away, chose the fantasy over the reality, where no one felt there for her. And we also get the chance to see Camilla at her best. What kind of mother she truly is. Have your child come out as bi? Spend the rest of the season wearing a pride pin. Have a basilisk take your daughter's place? Spend the rest of the show with 2 daughters instead of 1. Suddenly you have 6 children? Do what you can not only to feed them, but try whatever you can to fulfill their dietary needs. Your daughter is intent on making herself miserable because of deep-seated self-loathing from having the world continue to beat her down? Stop her from doing so, even if it means taking a trip to the demon realm, ready or not. I think the clearest argument to show how good of a mother Camilla is that she kept the snake skin, just a random thing which excited her child when young, and it is trained on her bedside. Weird or not. We do not get much time with Camilla, and most of the time it was her seemingly out of her depth, trying to be supportive. But she grows as any other character, even if it is something as small as facing her own trauma from her childhood and admitting to her child she was once as much of a nerd as she is. Because to a child, it's not a small thing. Of Ida, King, Amity, the Hex Crew, or Hootie, it was Camilla admitting her own fears, insecurities, and mistakes that gave Luz the one thing she had wanted her whole life. There are no small roles, and Camilla, for what we have of her, is as much a part of the crew as everyone else. Though I think hitting Kikimora with a bat kind of also gives you an auto-in. Now we have our last two characters, our two villains for this season. Let's do them together, back to back, because these two are even more interesting when compared to each other. First is the Collector. This season, we were given the Collector's backstory, how he was one of many cosmic beings who wander the universe, collecting what they want and destroying what they want. But we do not get much about the Archivists or why they did what they did. We get to see the effects their actions have on their younger brother. They took their friends away, and then had him blamed for it, so the last Titan would then retaliate against the Collector, before becoming the Boiling Isles. The Collector never asked for any of this. He was just an innocent child caught in the crossfires. Innocent being the operative term, because that is what makes the Collector as dangerous as he is. He is overall a good kid, but he does not understand anything about mortals. The most he really learned about them was likely from the Archivists and their dismissive ways, or from interacting with the Titans which, how long was that? A few weeks? A year? How long did he really spend around the creatures that are resistant to his magic, especially if he did not have the trust of the adult Titans? The one reason he is counted as a villain is not villainous intent, but that he wants to play, but does not understand the limits of other creatures. And on the other side, we have Belos. Belos, starting out, took 3 appearances in front of those around him. First, he appeared as the Emperor, caring for his people, chasing out the evils of the world around them for the good of the civilization. Second, the Outsider, strange to the ways of this world, slowly exploring just so that he can find a way back home after becoming lost in this world. And third, most pertinently for our comparison, he appears as an innocent young child, scared, running from the dangers in his own mind, the monsters only he is aware of. But he is none of them. When the cards at the table and everything starts falling apart, he shows his true form. A cancer, a parasite, someone who can only survive by leeching off talismans, leeching off others, all while with the goal of bringing everything to an end. Not caring what is lost, not caring who dies, all the goal is the destruction. In an age where we are trapped in culture wars, it is prudent to recognize the goal of some people is the destruction of culture, with nothing to replace it. I believe the detail that shows Belos and his personality the most is how he ends up when he thinks he is in control. Attached to the heart, arms spread wide, crucified, but purposely placed that way. A man who sees himself as a victim, who sees himself following some religious mandate, some higher calling, using imagery of his faith to justify the harm to others, the destruction of others, or to make himself feel holy and superior. I believe the most important singular moment of Belos' character is Luz talking to Papa Titan. When Luz asks if they are as bad as Belos, Titan stops her, saying that she should not buy the words he says, claims that what he is doing are coming from a genuine place. It is at that point, watching that scene for the first time, that it hit me. Why do we only get pieces of Belos' past? Why were we never given the full reason for the fallout between brothers? Never more than just rumors, never having anyone from the present learn anything? Because the ending was cut short. But more importantly, and connecting to the story we do have, it's because it does not matter. The reasons he gives, the reasons he tells himself, have always been meaningless. In his mind, the story of Philip Wintermain is some great tale of a hero. But that is all fiction. Because he is not Philip. He has always been Belos. Philip is a mask he wears, but he has always been the same empty corpse we saw these past 3 seasons. The reasons we never see the brother's story, why Papa Titan does not try to explain his mindset, is because none of that truly matters to Belos outside of an excuse for his actions. If he actually believes half of what he says, then he has also bought his own con because he has no excuse to be the way he is, not even living among witch hunters. Because so did Caleb, and yet time and time again, no matter how he raises them, the golden gods all turn against him. Because in all lifetimes, no matter the environment, Caleb and his clones end up choosing the right path. And Belos, even if both born in a different world, would always choose wrong. Which leads to a dichotomy between our villains. The Collector is easily beaten because he does not actually want to hurt anyone. When the 3 break away from his games, he does not get mad or try to destroy them, but he pouts. When they go to show him how they got together, he becomes compassionate without really understanding what that means, forgiving Belos in the shallowest way and expecting the battle to be over. Like being nice was just no game. Until the game stopped being fun, and the Collector was smacked in the face about the true meaning of death. Found for the first time a problem he could not just snap away, and felt regret and loss for the first time. And so the Collector ended up redeemed as any other character, finding the Owl House a place he could come home to if he ever wanted. Well, on the other hand, in the best scene of episode 3, Belos, when he is brought down by Ra first, does what he has always done and lies. Takes on the kind face, makes up some story about how it is not his fault, how everything he has done should just be swept under the rug. Then, whether called or happening naturally, the island washes away his lies, the acid revealing the human's true face, exposing his lies and the truth about him to the open air. All while the rain does nothing to lose, who only looks on wordlessly. The single best part of it all is that he tries to guilt Luz to help him, telling her that if she does not, he would be just as bad as the witches. However, every single word he uses to describe them are what he has done, what his sorry corpse has been responsible for all this time. As in real life, the more one shouts of the evils of others, the more often those words come to describe oneself. Belos, in the end, is one of the most realistic villains we have ever seen on Disney. And Dana and the crew should be praised about that on top of everything else. So, in summary, the Collector was a villain of circumstance who, like so many in the show and in children's media, are given a chance to be redeemed and end their show just as much a part of the family as the others. Belos, on the other hand, is a villain of choice, a villain who cannot be redeemed, who cannot be reasoned with, who will lie at every opportunity, with the main characters having to take the hard choice and let him die, to acknowledge she cannot save everyone. Both were handled well, especially Belos, and created a wonderful final story to wrap up the Owl House. And that we have examined all we can examine of Season 3 of the Owl House. However, this was also the series finale. To allow me the discretion to spend even more time, even though it's already been an hour, to discuss some final words about the Owl House and why I personally love it. You have heard why so many people love it, LGBT plus representation and the like, but allow me my time to be personal. First things first, this show has always been different from other shows since the beginning. I have swapped to anime as my main source of animation since middle school, I being able to find more enjoyment from them than Western cartoons since the end of the cartoon days. But I never abandoned Western cartoons. I still gave names I heard about a try, but often they did little to impress. Yes, even the big names like Adventure Time, Amphibia, and even Steven Universe. I watched one of the first episodes and was turned off. Especially Steven Universe. The first episode of that I watched was the one where they said, if every pork chop is perfect, a half a dozen times. It was not until 4 to 6 seasons in, when these shows had finally grown into their own, that I jumped into marathon them, usually getting caught up right before the end. And it's a place I'm still waiting for some shows. I heard some positive things about Molly McGee and similar shows, but not enough for me to devote time to watching them. Now, there are also many Western animated shows I have watched start to finish, like DuckTales and Well On Television, The Harley Quinn Show, and The New Carmen Sandiego. But those are different. I am walking into those shows already knowing what they are, and only really going to drop them if they end up being not worth it. I grew up on all three names, them being on television when I was the target audience. That is different from the first episode turning me on or off to a show. And then there is the Owl House. I saw a bit about it, a horror comedy, which, hey, horror fanatic. So I checked out the first episode, day of premiere, and was met with 6 words. Us weirdos have to stick together. I saw a nightmare realm filled with twisted creatures, sure, but I also saw a girl who never fit in with the people around her, no matter how much extra effort she put in, to the point where books were only friends. I saw a witch and a demon who were not taken seriously by the people around them. I saw me. Same with my LGBT plus friends, but with different context. This show means a lot for so many people, but it was pretty open up front that one of the people who would enjoy it were the people who feel alone in a crowded room. I would also claim the first episode starts in a more compelling place than the other shows are listed, but I know that is mostly bias. I am a weirdo, and the show specifically invited me in. How could I miss it? One of the many reasons The Owl House, in my opinion, was able to become as highly praised as it is that it is a story-driven series. Now, do not get me wrong, I grew up on episodic shows like Ed and Eddie and the rest of the cartoons, but one of the reasons I did eventually switch over to mostly anime is because of the inherent limits of storytelling in episodic cartoons. When they are good, they are fun, but status quo at the end of the episode, there was no lessons to be learned, no reasons to come back, to do the story again if you do not feel like it. No stakes. Which many of the shows I spoke on earlier hit their strides when they started dealing with episodes-long situations that just self-contained adventures. Story-driven shows, on the other hand, are on top of also being able to be fun, have the opportunity to have the characters grow. Have the naive girl who stumbled into this other dimension slowly make friends and learn new powers, and get to the point of establishing a romance. As I said, romances and representation is not the main reason I watch shows, but that does not mean I'm going to be disappointed on a pair of awesome girlfriends. It allows the cranky mentor to have actual layers to them, and eventually establish a real family with their kids, blood or not. It allows the team pet to actually stand as an equal part of the main cast. And it allows a villain to be an actual character in their own right, even if it is semi-episodic, the typical cycle of situation, mistake, and lesson learned. It still builds to the point where we can have episodes which are mostly just battle. Yesterday's lessons already learned and held closely by today's heroes. And the crying shame is, we're losing them again. While anime has at least a few dozen series with an ongoing plot, with some self-contained comedies, in the West we have pushes towards the episodic. And when we have many great story-driven shows, the quality of shows means nothing to those who only see it in dollar signs. If you think it was bad when rumors were going around the Owl House was cancelled because Disney could not stand the amount of gay, the fact that it was because they could not syndicate the show is kind of worse, because it means the show was actively punished for being good, for having the guts to tell a real story, instead of just modestly putting a show together and expecting parents who do not care to just plop a child in front of a television. And unfortunately, I think we are currently getting into a dark spot for story-driven shows. With the inclusion of the Owl House, we don't have any real shows which to fill the shoes of such. That will show with the recent purge of sites like HBO Max, and you can see the gap of upcoming shows being shallow to say the least. Of course, not all hope is lost. Disney Channel announcing a new show beginning this month, which might fill in the gap, but one future show is not helpful. I want to see Western animation flourish, but the question is now, as it always has been, can animation survive capitalism? The other part of the series that I consider a vast reason why I enjoyed the series are two simple, delightful words: found family. You see, as I have mentioned several times already, I am asexual. An asexual living in a world where people consider you broken if you are not in some kind of relationship by your early 20s, and are obsessed over romantic relationships. So as you might imagine, I keep my own shipping to a minimum. I do not have anything against other people's shipping, or being excited when LGBT plus actually is given representation, but romance is not what I look for first, especially with how poorly written some romances can be. No, my kind of show is the found family, where those who are not related by blood, for one reason or another, come together like they are unable to with their real families. That is the kind of relationship I look for myself, and what I like to see more of. The segregated parent, the blood siblings, the adopted children. That is what I am cheering for while everyone is falling out of their seats at a kiss. But in a world obsessed with romance, far too many found family stories eventually grow into two of the family members suddenly realizing they were in love with each other all along, and changing to a typical romance instead of just having them be brother and sister. Or despite found family being a decent part of the show, the central story is still mostly revolving around a couple. Good found family crumbs, but crumbs they are nonetheless. And then there was the Owl House. Yes, we had plenty of couples across the spectrum of sexuality. And yes, they were actually well written, which is always good to see. but at the end of the day, the promise from the first episode rings true throughout. It is first and foremost the story of three weirdos who have no one else becoming a family. And even while we were having many ships blossom before our eyes, at the center we had so much when it came to the group coming together, even if it was not romantic. We had Luce, who found herself a girlfriend, reconnected with her birth mother, gained friends who would never abandon her, and gained 3 siblings. We had Ida, who a large part of her arc was reconnecting with her family, and in general rekindling relationships she had previously destroyed, and adopting more than just King and Luce. At the very least, in my heart, she will always be Mama Ida to the bats. And King, well, he was given the least amount of development. His main journey was learning about his birth family while continuing to find comfort in who he chooses and who choose him back. And as much as I would have liked to see more characters have parts in the finale, at the end, the episode 3 was mostly reserved for the 3, working together to turn the Collector and stop Belos. And even when Luce was fully powered by a Titan, there was not a moment afterwards where she was off and far alone. The 3 danced together to clear away the corruption, and when Luce went to deal with Belos, the other 2, plus a wild rain they picked up along the way, were there at her back. No, as much as people love romance in the show, there is absolutely no surprise that one of the last moments in all 3 is all 3 weirdos renewing their vows, always a family, no matter what. The Owl House did what I have seen so many shows fail to do: place the found family at the center, which with so many people getting their romances everywhere, I enjoy being thrown a bone now and then. Special mention goes to one theme of the show in particular: the chosen hero or destined hero. As early as the 2nd episode, we have Luce looking for a grand destiny to forge, trying to imitate the stories she read of chosen ones and destined heroes. It comes with the desire for adventure, after all. There must be something greater out there, and it is easy enough for her to try to fit herself into the driver's seat. Believe she plays some big cosmic roles somewhere in all of it. Only half her dreams dashed that episode. However, things do begin to click into place for Luce. She develops a rival, but quickly finds acting as typical rivals would only end up hurting the 2 of them. And so she works to become friends, making up for her half of the conflict. Fast forward another season, and that girl is now her girlfriend. That was not destiny, but not something preordained, but something which was brought about because Luce saw the pain she was causing Amity and decided to apologize and work to be better, and Amity did so in kind. Luce found a princess to sweep her off her feet, not because she was the hero of the story, but because she was kind to Amity. And a more obvious example, because it's spelled out, we begin to learn glyphs, a type of magic that seems no one has figured out before. First light when she and King were backed against the wall, then ice when she took the time to connect with the island, and the other 2 shortly after. And, through diligence, she learned to chain them into different spells by combining the glyphs together. Why was she granted these powers? Well, because the Titan is still alive, and was watching their son, and saw what Luce was willing to do to protect those around her. And he grew to trust her, because she proved she could be trusted. The only real thing which was predetermined was her helping Belos, by teaching him the light glyph. But that was not the extent of her contributions to the Boiling Isles. Despite beating herself up for it, it was an entirely honest mistake, and one she fixed several times over. Belos did what he did because of himself, not because of Luz. So she was not destined to be little more than a pawn of a villain. And finally, at the final hour, Luz was granted the ability to use all 3 forms of magic and managed to take down Belos. But as with the rest of everything, which we just as with all the other things which went just right for her, this was not because of destiny. The reason she was given the powers was that she was the one who was there, and therefore the only option Titan had. And she was not only the person who was friends with his son, and who had spent the whole summer making the people living on his corpse have a generally better life. But the reason Luz was standing before them was because she sacrificed herself to save someone who an hour ago was torturing her and her family in twisted games. She was there for the same reason as everyone else in her life: kindness. There was never destiny involved in Luz's journey. She made choices, she made mistakes, she got back up, and made everything right in the end. Luz was given everything because she did what she thought was right, and she never did it thinking about what she would get in return. As much as I loved Amphibia and other shows like it, it was not prophesied from the beginning that Luz would be saving the Boiling Isles. It was something that Luz earned all on her own, simply by being the best person she could be. Now, with the praising out of the way, time for the most important question of the video. Who is my favorite character? Well, let me talk through a few honorable mentions first. Well, of course, the note that it is me. Of course, my picks do not involve any of our primary characters, all secondary. First, of course, is V, beautiful child V. The beautiful little sister with the lovely design. We only had so much time with the newest member of the Nocetas. Of course, I'm going to mess that up the one time I say it. Which, the little we got from her is a crime and shame, but with the 2 episodes where she does get decent screen time, she did prove herself to be one of my tops. And even more towards the top of honorable mentions, we have a character sadly absent for most of Season 3. Hooty. Hooty, I'm well aware, is not everyone's cup of tea. He is invasive, annoying, and usually just makes everyone around him unsettled or confused. Which brings us to one of the main reasons I like him. He is relatable. But on a more serious note, Hooty is the 4th member of our Owl House family, and the Owl House itself, and the one not allowed to have a story arc. Which, as I mentioned for other review videos, characters who do not grow and are just comic reliefs are good foils for characters who actually have an arc. That said, come on, nothing for the last episode? Only 1 line in the whole of Season 3? For the character who gave us Harpy Ida, Screaming King, and Lumity as canon? He is the real god of the Boiling Isles. And speaking of, there are still some unanswered questions about the show. I believe there was some theories going around about Hooty and holes, as well as the fact Papa Titan kind of had the Hooty in place of one of his eyes. Hooty has as much potential, and him not getting any payoff is the truly worst thing about the abridged 3rd season. That brings us to my favorite character. Who is it who beats V? It's Hooty. Even if I included the 3 main characters on this list. Beats out Luz. It is none other than Amity Blight. And no, not just for the same reasons most people like her. Though, if we were approaching it from the shipping front, yes, I do also highly regard the Lumity episodes. What can I say? When you live in a world with shallow, poorly written romances shoved into almost every show because people are obsessed with romances, you do kind of gravitate to the actual good ships while you can. So, why Amity? For me. Well, long before Grom and everyone jumping on the Lumity train, Amity was introduced as a typical mean rival character. We had her pick on Willow, freak out when her top spot was taken from her, find the girl who humiliated her is a student of her own teacher's rival/sister, does the mean girl thing of having an exclusive party. Typical rival with some scenes of her actually having nobility and honor under that honor student exterior. Building up to the typical rival/change of heart plot. Come the episode which officially put me on the Amity train, Lost in Language. After 2.5/3 episodes with Amity, we have her family, and are finally given the chance to see things from her perspective. Amity, who had a mysterious humanoid pretending to be an abomination, and making her, if temporarily, lose the top spot in the school, which despite all the hard work she had put in. Amity, who is on the fast track to be the next star of the greatest coven on the island, until not only this girl but her own teacher ends up humiliating her in front of who knows how many people. Amity sees the girl a third time, with the siblings who had belittled her, in her secret space, stealing her diary, and she calls loose a bully. Sure, pot calling the kettle black, but with what she did with Willow, and all things, but she was not entirely wrong about the things Luce had done without thinking. And Luce does not contradict it, likely an early sign of her tendency to blame herself for everything, but that is not the point. The point is, she, in a way, was right, and Luce acknowledged it, just as Amity admitted her part of the fault later on. Which is big. Big, big, big. Do you know how many shows I've seen tease redemptions of the bully characters only to pull it away for a worship of the status quo instead of an actual logical plot reason? Absolutely garbage writing. Yeah, we can have characters like Belos who have no redemption at all. Heck, we can have Boschers who redeem themselves without leaving the path of the mean girl. But to have actually not just redemptions, but characterizations of the bully character is rare. And acknowledging that the main character is also less than perfect, to the point where she hurt the bully as the bully hurts others. As a child who was bullied, I want to see a chance for the bully characters to be redeemed. Not hinting at something that never goes anywhere until the door shuts because the creators do not know how to write the character better. Not someone who is suddenly now a friend with limited personality after the redemption, because Amity did not change overnight. She still was mean to Willow and Gus later into the season 1, and did not make up with Willow make up fully until season 2. What I want to see are those who have hurt others have a chance to realize that and change for the better. It is much better than a message of people cannot be redeemed and status quo is God. So yes, Amity Blight became my favorite Owl House character early on, and through the power of Lumity was given more than enough screen time to stay there the entire time. If I was viewing episode by episode, I would go into it more, but we are here for season 3. We have already covered characters, and the current time is almost an hour and 30. And I have one more thing that I wish to get off my chest. So now, everyone wants to see the Owl House continue. What are my thoughts on that? As if anyone needs to ask, right? Right? Well, here is the thing with an Owl House continuation. I grew up in the 90s, where many more long-running shows were a thing on American television, as opposed to the random cancellations we see commonly now. And we have plenty of good cartoons which were good for a time, for the first 5 or 10 years or so. But then they continued on and on and on until, well, anything that had made them special had long melted away. Seasonal rot, where a show which was once special goes on long enough to lose that spark. True, on the one hand, we do want to see our favorite characters continue to go on with their lives. Heck, it's nothing new. When Arthur Conan Doyle killed off Sherlock Holmes, his audience went wild until he came back from the dead. But on the other hand, one of my favorite stories is a little piece known as Assassination Classroom. You might have heard of it recently. Florida is banning it like every other book. But one of the most beautiful things about the story is that it happens just as we are told. We are promised a year, and it ends in a year. Gloriously bittersweet and full of feelings. In a world where shows are getting cut short or dragged on too long, Assassination Classroom is an example of a story allowed to go on just as long as it needs to. So, will the Owl House ever have a perfect ending? No, Disney already decided against that. But what we currently have is wonderful. We get to see peace come to the boarding isles. All of our kids are growing up and having good lives, and we get to send off everyone we hold dear. It is a good end. Can it be better? Yes. Can it be worse? Yes. Do I trust Dana and her team to do right by the characters? Yes. Do I trust whatever network executive who would be in charge of making decisions on how long the show aired? Not any life. So in conclusion, as much as we want more, and even if we are given more, the Owl House has to end someday. Believe me, having more time with the characters would be great. However, we do have to say goodbye someday. So as much as I want more of the Owl House, more with our characters, I have been burned too many times of shows being denied a good ending, or the ability to end at all, that I am wary of a continuation. So as much as I'm on board with more Owl House, we also need to get it ready to one day have to say goodbye, lest we find ourselves with another SpongeBob. And so, we are at the end. Well, comes time for us to say goodbye to the Owl House one more time. Maybe we'll meet again in the future, but for now we have reached a beautiful place to say goodbye. Thank you to all weirdos who made it to the end of this monster review, and I will see you for the next episode of whatever show it might be. Bye!